Hi guys, my name is Irina. Welcome to my channel. I am currently a D2 in dental school, and today we're talking about orgo. If you have to take orgo, you know that instantly as soon as you say that, everyone is like, oh, organic chemistry, like you're gonna die. Let me tell you, you're not gonna die. It's not fun, and it is very challenging, but I feel like there are ways to do well and things about orgo that no one really talks about. So that's what I'm going to do today. When I took orgo 1, and then I took orgo 1 again, and then I took orgo 2, and then I took orgo 2 again. So, although you're like, why would I listen to this girl? She had to repeat both. I really had to sit down for both and say, what did I do wrong and how can I do better and how am I gonna actually pass it this time? So granted, it's been a long time since I've taken the course. I sat down and wrote all these things down in between both of them. So I kind of want to split up this video into like planning to take orgo, mindset / when you're in orgo, and then actual tangible things that help with the rigor of orgo, because it is a hard class. There's a reason it has this reputation, but you're gonna get through it, okay? I got through it. After all of that, I'm still in dental school and I'm gonna be a dentist. There's definitely gonna be some rough moments, and I just wanna help you get through them a little bit easier. So planning for orgo, if you know you have to take it and you're ahead of the game and researching now. First is, this kind of goes with all subjects, but this one it's pretty important. If you have control over it, research your professor. So go on Rate My Professor, ask around, and see the best professor that everyone says. A good professor helps in this situation, but it's also not the end of the world if you don't have one. One thing I learned in orgo is that it's like learning another language, which makes it really hard if you've never learned another language and if you don't realize that, because you're just confused all the time and they're throwing new terms at you, and if you don't spend the time with the material, it just all piles on and you get really confused. So try to research your professor, and if all of them are kind of the same, just pick one that goes with your schedule. And also, if you're in orgo now and you're like, my professor does not make sense, there's ways around that, so it's okay. But I did want to include this because if you are planning, it's a good thing to consider, and you probably know that, but let's get into the rest of the things. Second, and this is really important because I did not follow it and it screwed me over multiple times. So don't overschedule your semester. This is not a class to try to fit in a bunch of other classes. I tried to do that the first time I took orgo. I tried to take it in 3 weeks with 2 other classes, and let me tell you, that was a disaster. It was literally a disaster. Don't try to rush it, and then if you're taking it in a regular semester, don't try to add in a bunch of other hard classes. To do well in this class, you're gonna need a lot of hours, and it takes a lot of energy out of you to learn this stuff, but you totally can. And it's just important that now is not the time to overload your schedule. And then again, if you're already in it, you just gotta have really good time management skills. Block out hours to focus on orgo and orgo alone. Ideally at like the time that you study best. So like for me, it was the morning. If you have an hour in between classes, it's surprisingly actually a really good time to look at this, because this class literally made my head hurt because it requires so much brain power. So small spurts is actually really good. And then as the semester goes on, you'll be able to sit with it longer. But in the beginning, there's a limit on how much you can learn and how much it's gonna make sense and then dwindle. Even if you sit down for an hour, aka probably 30 to 45 minutes of focused work, that is so productive because your brain can only handle so much. So just keep that in mind and don't say, oh, I only have an hour, so I can't do anything. And then later, obviously, you will need the multiple hour blocks to sit down and work on it, but don't disregard those like here and there minutes that you have for this class. Because think about it, if you commit 15 minutes to solving like 2 or 3 questions, and really understanding those concepts, it's gonna add up. And you're not gonna feel as exhausted because it's only a short amount of time. So just keep that in mind. I think that would be really helpful. Okay, the better parts. Let's talk about the mindset around this class. So I feel like immediately when you say organic chemistry, everyone is like, oh my God, organic chemistry. And there is a reason that people say that. However, I think it's a really toxic mindset to have, and I had it. I think if you go into it with a positive mindset and say, this class is really hard It's like learning a new language. I've never seen it before. I'm gonna be really uncomfortable, but I'm gonna do well. You have to tell yourself that you can get through it because you can. It's just another class. You've taken a million classes before because I know that you've taken chemistry 1 and 2 to take this class and you've gotten through those. So this is just another class that you can study for and learn. It's all learnable. There's a reason that so many people do pass it. I spent a lot of time in that mindset of, oh my God, this is so hard. Subconsciously, I think I told myself I couldn't do it, so I didn't do it. There are gonna be moments where you get extremely overwhelmed, but really taking a second and acknowledging that you're overwhelmed and this is hard and you feel like you can't do it, and then getting rid of all of that and just keep pushing on because you can do it. The second thing that also kind of goes hand in hand to that is trying to take the emotions out of it. The amount of hours that I spent stressing over orgo versus studying orgo, probably equivalent. And if I had just spent those hours that I spent stressing actually studying and just doing the thing, I probably would have passed the first time. This is just like really good to learn about a lot of things because there's a reason for stress and it's good. It means we care. It keeps us motivated to a degree and it's an important feeling to have. However, honing in on that stress and focusing on it too much, it doesn't actually help. So there's like a threshold where stress is helpful and then everything above it is not helpful. So it's, like I said, it's okay to acknowledge the stress that you're feeling and maybe go cry. Crying's really good. I say that all the time. Be overwhelmed, but then pull yourself together because that's something I didn't do. Like I said, I spent so many hours and I think I let it all just like build up in my head and I told myself I couldn't do it and so I didn't do it. I hated orgo when I was in it, and then by the time I took DAT, I was like, this is kind of fun. Now I feel like even looking at it, I don't think I would hate it as much because I spent so many hours with it that it made sense. All right, let's get into the tangible things that you can do to learn all this material. So for this class, there's gonna be a lot of resources online, which is great, but at the same time, sometimes I found myself getting more confused with all the different ways the information was presented online. I would say start with the resources you're given. So the main things here are gonna be going to class prepared, so looking at the stuff ahead of time. And like I know your professor will tell you this regardless of who they are because it is so helpful. So the way I did this when I was doing well in this class was I would get the textbook and I would read it and try to take like very minimal notes because you don't want this to take so much time that you're just like regurgitating information onto a piece of paper. But I would take notes of like big concepts that seemed to be repeating or words that were really confusing. And then I would go to class, actually pay attention. And if your professor isn't the best, I still would go to class. Although you might not understand it all immediately when they're speaking, there's things that you're gonna pick up here and there that are gonna help make everything make sense later. Also, if life happens and you didn't look at the material before and you have no idea what they're talking about, sometimes I would record the lectures, and this just depends on your learning style, but for me it was really helpful to go back later and listen to it because once I looked at it more and more and then I went back, I would be like, oh my God, that's what they were talking about. So even if you're not on top of it all the time, you can still do well. There's just like little things that you gotta do to set yourself up for success. After class, I would do the homework that was assigned to us and see if I could get through it on my own. And then I really utilized the tutoring center for this class because hearing another person explain it, sometimes it'll just make it click in your brain. And then sometimes I would go there and I would be like, you are making it way more confusing. I would just leave and try to go spend time with it on my own. But then later I would be like, oh, that's what they were saying. And practice exams. Those practice exams I should have prioritized. If your professor gives you those, make sure that that is like a non-negotiable. You're doing those like as soon as you physically can, because that is exactly what's going to show you what you know and what you don't know. And I always procrastinated and tried to do them like 2 days before the exam, and then I was like, I don't know anything. So don't be like me, please. Doing these things and actually full-heartedly doing them was when I learned orgo the best. So going to class prepared and having looked at the textbook or the notes before, because it's really just going to be like seeing it over and over and then eventually it's going to click. It sounds wrong, But I promise that is how you learn orgo, and it's just like repetition and practice. And honestly, that mindset has helped me study a lot in dental school as well. Okay, next thing is don't fall behind. I talked about this tip in the GPA video, is having a Sunday deadline for being caught up with everything. In this class, that is so important because the material really builds on itself. If you skip something and say, oh, I don't really need to know that, I'll come back to it later, it's gonna come up. It's gonna come up before you get back to it. And so it's really important to just learn it in the moment and make sure by Sunday you can say that you have a good comprehension on the material thus far. If you don't do this, this will be the thing that's in between you and doing well. So this one I would say is probably the most important of this whole video because everything builds on each other, and the final for me, and most likely for everyone, because I'm pretty sure it's a standardized chemistry organization that has the final, it's all cumulative. So you have to know it. Honestly, if you just think about being able to answer every single one of those questions on that final, imagine that because it would be the best feeling ever. And thinking about mastering this class is gonna feel so great. Okay, and next with this class, you don't know it until you know it. So, it sounds redundant, but you don't know it until you can essentially write out every step. Like until you can answer the whole question front to back from your own brain, that is when you actually know it. So not relying on the multiple choice part and being like, oh, I'll be able to recognize the answer. This class is extremely conceptual, so you want to be able to look at everything and be like, how did I get this answer? Why is this the right answer? And this is a tactic that has helped me a lot in dental school as well. So I don't rely on the multiple choice part, is I try to be able to come up with the answers in my own brain instead of just being able to recognize it if it shows up on the test. Okay, last tactical thing is going over your exams with your professor if you don't get above a 95%. And this is also because everything is cumulative and builds on each other. So you really want to make sure that you're learning the previous stuff and not just trying to skip past it and say I'll get back to it later, because you're not going to get back to it later. And then it's going to be the final and you're going to be like, I have no idea what that is. Set aside an hour to go to your professor's office and say, I don't understand this concept. And most of these professors care. They want to teach you. I know this can be scary the first time you go in because you don't want your professor to think that you're stupid. I felt the same way, but it means you care. And again, this is the first time you're ever seeing this material, so you're not stupid. This is a hard class. They know that. So that's all the tips I have for you today. And I just want to say it's going to be a process. You're probably going to feel really uncomfortable at times and you're going to doubt yourself, but you can do well in this class. I promise you, it's just a subject that you have to learn. And if you have to repeat it, it is not fun. And I'm trying not to let anybody else do that. If you get put in that position, it's okay. You just got to take the situation and see what you can take out of it and learn from it. And like I said, I learned a lot of real life skills in this class. If you listen back to these tips, they can apply to almost anything, school and not school. So try to remember that it's all a learning experience. It's not fun, but it's just another subject and you can learn it and you can get really good at it and maybe you can enjoy it. And I'm exhibit A of that. I retook both of them and I'm in dental school and still gonna be a dentist. Looking back, I would have much rather this been something that I worked really hard at and was like, oh yeah, I did really well in that and but was proud of myself. But you know, like it's all part of life, okay? So take a deep breath. You're gonna be okay. I know it's hard, but you're gonna get through it. And if you have any questions, put them below. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.